Welcome back, folks. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to talk to you tonight about something that has intrigued me for years. I want to disclose something to you as well. I was born in Arkansas. The house that I live in now is only about 30 miles from where I was born. I have lived in about 4 cities, all within 30 miles of each other in northeast Arkansas. During my time on Earth, I have not driven very far at all in a personal vehicle. Now, as a commercial truck driver, I don't even know how many miles I have driven. 4 million? 5 million? I honestly don't know. I got my start of being a world traveler, actually a United States traveler. I have not been out of the United States except for a couple of trips that I took to Canada. That's the only country I have been in besides the United States. But I have traveled to all corners of the United States in a commercial vehicle. When I first got in a commercial vehicle, it was my brother-in-law's 76 model cab-over Freightliner. This was about 1984. I rode on the truck with him during the summer while I was out of high school, just to get out of Arkansas, to do something besides my normal activities that I had done before that. I was set back by all the traffic that is in the United States. Then in the year 2000, I started driving a commercial truck myself. I was still set back and astonished by all of the traffic that a person endures in the United States. Now, I understand, and it makes sense to me to get into heavy traffic in larger cities, especially rush hour morning traffic, rush hour afternoon traffic, people getting off work, people going to work, people going to dentist appointments or doctor's appointments, spending all day doing tests at hospitals, doing their business in a larger town, and leaving in the afternoon, coming into town in the morning. I get that. That totally makes sense to me. The bigger the city, the more traffic. What I do not understand, and I have never understood, is all the traffic just out on a freeway, an interstate in the United States. Let's just say Interstate 40 after you leave Memphis, Tennessee, going to Nashville. Have you ever stopped to just look at how many cars and pickups are on the road? When I look back to before I started driving a commercial vehicle, I had nowhere really to go in a personal vehicle. There was one time that I drove to Dallas, Texas on a vacation, and I went down there, spent a couple of days, and came back. There was a couple of times where I drove to Memphis, Tennessee, which is not far from my house at all, maybe an hour and a half drive, but it wasn't every day. That was odd, really, for me to even go to Memphis in a personal vehicle. Now, in a commercial vehicle, that's totally different. That's not really what I'm talking about with you here today. What I'm talking about is me noticing all of the traffic from being in a commercial vehicle. It got to the point where I was so intrigued by all of the vehicles that were on the road every day. Not talking about big cities. I'm just talking about freeway traffic, interstate traffic, not in city, out on the interstate system. The first thing that I thought of is, do these people have jobs? Is there that many people that are rich in the United States that are able to travel so much? Then I started connecting more things together, looking at hotels. Have you ever looked at a hotel along an interstate while you were driving by in a commercial vehicle? At night, they're full. Even in the little town that I live in now, I sometimes will drive by hotels just to look at the parking lot, and the hotels are full. And I think to myself, why are so many people here in hotels? Why are so many people traveling? It's not just during the summer months. You see it in the wintertime, springtime, summertime, fall, all seasons, all months, all year. It got to the point where it interested me so much, and I was getting too concentrated on it. I remember one time I was in Florence, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, across the state line in Florence, Kentucky. I was at a TA truck stop. I was in my 379 Pete. I was going in for an oil change. I got into the bay, got out of the truck. The service tech and I were just chit-chatting. We were not really talking about anything. The traffic out on the interstate, that was Interstate 75, was just non-stop, back and forth and back and forth, bumper to bumper, 70, 75 mile an hour traffic, and it was just roaring past that TA truck stop. And the technician was getting everything ready to do the oil change in my truck, and I just looked at him and I said, this is something that has bothered me my whole life since I have drove a truck. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And I said, have you ever just stopped working and looked out at the interstate here? And he said, of course, I have. What's your point? And I said, this traffic is non-stop out on the interstate. bumper to bumper traffic, 70, 75 miles an hour all day. Does it ever slow down? And he said, yes, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I guess. Between maybe midnight and 4 a.m. It will slow down, but it won't stop. But then it picks right back up early in the morning. And I said, have you ever just wondered why so many people are on the road? And he said, yes, I have wondered about that. And we got to discussing and talking more about it. And I said, is it dentist appointments, doctor appointments, people going to find jobs, going to work, going home from work, going shopping? And he said, yes, all of the above. You're correct. It's all of that. And I said, there can't be that many people doing that every single hour of every single day of the week. And he said, no. And I said, what is it? I'm just so intrigued. It's just so much for me to handle. And I have thought about it for years. What is it? Why are so many people so involved with driving cars and trucks? And he said, you want me to tell you? Are you ready? Are you ready for the reveal? And I said, yes, I'm ready. Hit me with it. I need to know. I've got to know what it is. And he said one simple word: drugs. I laughed. I laughed at him and said, okay, I get it. It's drugs. And he looked back at me and just shrugged his shoulders and went back to work. He said, buddy, it's drugs. I have never forgotten that day. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. There are some people watching this video right now that you know a person or knows a person, or you know a person that knows a person where you can buy illegal drugs. I know you know this. I'm not pointing anyone out. I'm not narking on anyone. But you know a person, or you know a person that knows a person where you can buy some drugs. You can get what you want. How does it get there? I have traveled to all corners of the United States, from Southern California to the Northeast, from Washington State all the way down to Florida. I have been in cities and towns all across the United States. I would fare to venture that 75 to 85% of the cities that I have been in have illegal drugs in those cities. Even little towns. If you think about it and you really concentrate and you really think about it, those drugs have to get there somehow. Right? They have to get there. A commenter commented on one of my videos earlier and said, don't forget Trump was the one that let all of the Canadian and Mexican truck drivers into the United States by passing the U.S.A. Trump was guilty of that. I'm not quoting him exactly as he said it, but I said, would you further explain what you're talking about? And he said, absolutely sure. And he went on to explain how it opened the borders up. Even though Trump was talking about closing the borders and building a wall and keeping illegals out, he passed this law to basically open the borders up for commercial travel in between the countries. That must go hand in hand with personal vehicles. It has to. There's really no way around it. It has to open the borders up. Even though Trump is talking about closing borders, what he did with passing this opens the borders. It's a catch-22. It truly is. When you open the borders, nefarious things happen. There's something I wanted to read to you that I just looked at. Border officials seized 4,600 pounds of fentanyl along the southern border in 2020, a number that skyrocketed to 26,700 pounds in 2023, a 480% increase. Most of the fentanyl seized by agencies in 2023, about 98.9%, 26,700 out of 27,000 pounds was seized at the Mexican-United States border. How does it get from that border to every city in the United States? How does it spread? I have asked this question many times to a lot of people that I personally know. They say it's easy. It's coming in on commercial trucks. Commercial trucks are the easiest way to transport the drugs in. They drop the drugs off, and then LTL carriers spread the drugs out all across the United States. UPS, FedEx, Estes, you name the LTL company. I'm not specifically blaming an LTL company. I'm just saying the people I've talked to says that's the network. It comes in on commercial trucks and then it's spread out through LTL companies all across the United States. I think some of that is true. Some of that is true. I don't think that's the majority of how it's transported. I really don't. Have you ever seen the Clint Eastwood movie, The Mule? If you haven't seen that movie, I will not give the movie away to you. You need to go watch that movie. But if you want to see a little glimpse, a slight little sliver of a glimpse of how drugs are transported, watch that movie. It's fiction. It's totally a fiction made up story. But I believe there is more truth there than what Mr. Eastwood is telling. I think he has just chipped off a little tip of the iceberg. fuel right now, gas right now, is hovering around nationwide somewhere around $3 a gallon, plus or minus. I just bought some gas last weekend. I think it was $2.85, $2.75, something like that. It has been upwards of $3, $3.50 a gallon. Diesel is even more, of course, $4.50, $5 a gallon. How can a person with the economy that we're in afford to drive a vehicle hundreds of miles every day? And I'm sure there's an argument out there, well, it's just one or two people from each neighborhood in a city. Most people just go to work and go home. And I get that. I get that. I don't know how many vehicles are registered in the United States. But when you have an accident or a backup on the interstate, it just takes seconds, a couple of minutes, and you have 10-mile backups. Sure, there's a lot of commercial trucks in those backups, but there's thousands and thousands of cars in those backups. Here's the thing about living in the United States. We have rights. We have constitutionally protected rights. There was a thing that got brought up a few years ago called stop and frisk. If you're not aware of that, you can look it up. Basically, it is saying that a police officer can just stop a person on the road for no real reason and frisk the person. The problem with that is it goes against the Constitution for illegal search and seizure of property. There has been a couple of incidences in Texas where Texas officials would randomly stop vehicles and search their vehicles and seize money, cash money, out of the vehicles, and it was impossible to get the money back. They have been sued many times for this practice. Texas was probably trying to do that to counteract the drug activity in the United States. The transportation of drugs, of illegal money laundering, of drug money. It is very hard in the United States to just randomly pull over a car for no reason and search the vehicle for drugs. There has to be suspicion of a crime that has been committed. And it is very hard for these police officers to catch people. Let's just say that you got a small bag of drugs, put it in the console of your car, and left the town that you live in and drove 300 miles up the road, dropped the drugs off wherever you dropped them off at, and come back home. Who is to stop you from doing that? It is illegal. But you have rights as a U.S. citizen. You can travel at will. If I wanted to go home and get in my vehicle and drive 300 miles with no drugs in my vehicle, No one says I cannot do that. It is very, very hard to catch people transporting drugs. This story that I will show you here is something that happened not far from my house. There was a drug bust in Arkansas that netted 869 pounds of marijuana in Lone Oak County, Arkansas. The Arkansas State Police found the drugs in a random traffic stop. Here's what was weird about that. The occupants in the vehicle was a man and female, a male and female, from Brazil. They weren't even U.S. citizens. And they told the officer they had left California and was going to Florida. When the officer pulled them over, he got an overwhelming smell of marijuana emanating from the vehicle. He brought the police dog out, searched it, and pulled out 869 pounds of marijuana worth an estimated $3.8 million. That's one. How many hundreds, how many thousands of cars was going along that interstate at that same exact moment that was carrying drugs that didn't get pulled over? Now you times that by 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, 365 days in a year. That's a lot of drugs being transported in the United States. A lot of drugs. If it is all coming from the southern border, and Trump passed this law, the U.S.A, that opens the borders up for commercial vehicles, doesn't it open the border up for passenger vehicles as well? The border is being overwhelmed. I don't know the exact number. It wouldn't surprise me if they're only catching 3 to 5% of the drugs being transported over the border. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of drugs are being seized at the border. It wouldn't surprise me if only a small percent of those drugs are actually being confiscated or found. It would not surprise me at all if someone found out the true number and 80% of the cars traveling up and down the interstate had drugs in the vehicle. I like watching television shows of live PD, cops, stuff like that. That type of show. And it is constantly happening in traffic stops all across the United States on those programs. The cops pull over the vehicle. They're suspicious. They have false tags. They have missing tags, out of date expired tags. The car is weaving. Whatever reason they are pulled over. Then the officer searches the vehicle, brings in a canine, and gets alerted that there's drugs in the vehicle. Folks, this is out of control. It is out of control, and I don't know how it can be stopped. It is so out of control that I don't know how it can be stopped at this point. Thousands and thousands of people are dying from drug overdoses in the United States. This is something that is very close to me because I had 2 family members that have died as a result of drugs. I don't know how many other people on here are watching this, but we have gotten to the point where it's not even really looked at or cared about anymore. It is an absolute epidemic in the United States for drug transport, drug usage. I would love to know what your thoughts are about how to curb this, how to offset it. I don't think it will ever be completely stopped. But I would like to know what your thoughts are about slowing it down. Am I crazy for thinking this much drugs is being transported in personal vehicles? Was the guy that was changing my oil that day just talking a bunch of crap? Or was he onto something? Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. Am I crazy or am I onto something? And how do we stop it if this is true? Thanks for watching and have a good day.